It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back on a very healthy Tuesday morning. Thank you for choosing to tune in for our health chats. Now, across South Africa, for the past week, we've been mostly enjoying some pretty pleasant, actually quite hot, warm winter weather, unnaturally. And combined with all of the sport going on over the weekend, despite the performances of our national sporting teams, there were definitely some fires lit and some chops thrown on the barbie. So braaiing is a part of our culture. It's a part of our DNA, I think. But most of the time, as we do this and get onto maybe our third or fourth brewery roll, we don't consider the long-term effects that this lifestyle has on us. Do I sound a little deflated? Yes, I am. Well, hopefully Dr. Darren Green doesn't scare us too much this morning. Come on, man. There's nothing wrong with a braai.
Your side.
Come on, man.
Well, it's like you mentioned, you know, often at a braai you'll dig into your third boerewors roll or you overindulge with just meat.
You would never eat that much meat on a normal
No,
occasion.
unless you live in Bloemfontein.
Yeah.
You have it for
Or in
breakfast.
the prehistoric times. Yeah.
But Dr. Darren Green, what are the health implications for eating too much red meat?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing, we all know that red meat contains protein as well. It's rich in iron. So lots of positives about red meat. But on the bad side, different cuts of meat have different concentrations and layout of fat. And we know from having things like lamb chops, for example, the fat on the edge, you can choose which cut you want, really, when you purchase meat. And the amount of fat is the
Fat
thing.
equals flavour.
And our nation, as a fat-eating nation, ranks amongst some of the top in the world because we eat so much red meat. The issue is which meat you're eating and the whole process of the meat. That's important.
I'm glad you mentioned the P word, process, because when it comes to sausages and boerewors, I know we also create award-winning boerie in this country, which is made from only the finest ingredients, but a lot of boerewors out there, we don't know what has gone into that, the additives, and they do use a lot of fat in that. How do we go about finding the right kind of meat for
So
our
most
braai?
people don't check what's in the boerewors. They look at what's the cheapest per kilogram when they go to the supermarket.
I'm guilty of that.
Or they look at a label that someone else mentioned once upon a time, or they ate at someone's house. You know, and it's all about taste, taste, taste. But as you start becoming aware that what you put into this, what I love to call the pie hole, causes inflammation. It causes inflammation.
Is that the medical term?
That's the medical term. You know, you've got to look at the type of meat that's in there. Is it ostrich? Is it lamb? Is it beef? You know, what's added to it? The preservatives that we add to keep meat longer at certain temperatures as well is also a thing. And the salt content. So a lot of people, hypertension, blood pressure issues, salt content of our meat. And then what we do is we still then add salt on the braai while we're seasoning it, we know. And a lot of the seasoning also contains salt and even more preservatives. So you need to know what's in the product you're using. So look at what percentage of the boerewors, for example, is meat, how much is water, and what the additives are. Some of them even contain MSG, which a lot of people know about as well, the colorants, etc., etc. So look at the label. It's a good start.
And it's a massive calorie load just on that.
It is, because there's a lot of fat in certain products, and often wors is made from a lot of just the mold fine leftovers after they've done some of the main cuts.
Okay.
And but I won't disturb your appetite.
We won't destroy our lives just then. But I know there are also some healthy benefits for cooking off, eating off a braai. So it's not all doom and gloom, but we'd love to hear from you if you've got any questions relating not only just to the braai, but also those high fat, high red meat diets, high salt diets and cholesterol. 021-430-9881. The doctor's in the house.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
All right, so with our healthy accompaniments now sorted, we get back to our master braaiing, and Bobby showed up just in time for the
Tickling my
braai. Something I think that I often think about, because I'm a traditionalist when it comes to our fires. Hello, Bobby, you beautiful boy. Wood versus charcoal or briquettes. Are there chemicals in those briquettes that can make their way into the food?
Yeah, so wood becomes charcoal. It's often just aged or compressed. But what you need to understand is that the carcinogenic part, you know, the cancer-causing stuff that we all fear, quite clearly means that the difference between using wood and charcoal is almost negligible in terms of what you choose to braai with. The braai masters that take pride in their braais will tell you there's a different heat time, will last longer if you use rooikrans versus blue wattle, etc., versus briquettes. And depending on what they're making, they'll actually choose which coals to use. Jan Braai and those guys know a lot about that. But importantly, it's not actually the charcoal and the wood that has been linked to carcinogenic, in other words, cancer-causing. Funny enough, it's actually keeping the temperature of protein at really high temperatures for a long time that has a carcinogenic effect. That's the one thing.
Don't overcook your meat, yo.
And the second thing is when the fat drips onto the fire and the grill and makes that smoke then forms a compound that goes back up at the meat. And if you leave the meat on long enough, it residues on the meat. So the burnt fat actually has a compound. So the two things to remember for those Google fanatics out there is HCA, which is a heterocyclic amine or protein derivative, and PCA. So that's what they can look up if they want to Google it and get into it. HCA and PCA in terms of braaiing meat and cancer-causing compounds. So
that is really interesting, man.
Very, very interesting. Now, Dr. Darren Green, can we go back to portion control?
Yes.
Because I often find myself, when you just nibble, you tend to overindulge. I have this habit at the minute all the meat is in front of you, I completely lose my appetite. But that's not the case for everyone.
I feel so sorry for you, man.
What's the right amount?
Diametrically opposed to that.
Yeah. How much should you be eating? Well, a dietitian showed me something once that was quite useful. And they use your own hand. So if you're eating fish, you can have a full hand. Okay. The size of your portion, if you look at your own hand, is quite useful.
This is light.
Yeah. And then obviously if you're eating chicken, like fillet without the skin, obviously you can go to the crease, which is 3/4 of a hand. And when you're moving on to red meat, obviously, you're getting smaller.
All that braai
I was
just for
way
that.
off.
so many people ask me, but what if I have a duck hunter? So just the size of the portion, it's a good idea to look at your plate, how big the piece of
But you go through all
meat
the
should be.
hours of braai. At least I feel like when I get invited to a braai on a Saturday evening, you only eat Sunday morning. So all that hours of waiting just for a small piece of meat. Like
Correct.
that.
I mean, everyone loves braai broodjies, and they love keeping meat till the next day and making sandwiches with it. But the pre-snacks while you're braaiing is what it's all about.
And the
carrots.
refreshments
So
that
we
go
need to
with it.
check what we're actually ingesting beforehand. It's the cream dips and the lovely tortillas and nachos that we're enjoying as a nation here. We love that. And obviously, I'm not even mentioning the carbs in terms of beer yet, that get thrown on the meat, on the fire, and that get consumed.
I'm trying to treat you with the utmost respect as a doctor here, but I just want to say boo to everything that you say. I just found myself...
We're just becoming mindful of the amount. Just mindful to know exactly. So there are certain hacks that you can introduce where you can enjoy your meat and have it prepared properly. But obviously, the time and how long you cook it and the fat dripping on the fire, if you trim some of the fat off at least, it does help. And then also, it's not something that you do every night, although there's some people that do braai
How
every
often
night.
is too often for a
You
braai?
know, that depends on how much you're eating. Yeah, definitely. And you'd have to look at your entire lifestyle. I mean, they say it's 80% diet, 20% exercise to look after this meat box, this machine of yours, and to hone it and get it into shape. But, I mean, you need to look at your levels of activity. That will determine how many calories you should actually be eating and what desire you have in terms of your work.
Okay.
I'm going to run every day so I can braai once a year. That's basically, I'm trying to do the ratios in my head, man. So Dr. Boo for you, man. No, honestly, guys, there is a way that we can approach our braais. I'm going to ask you a little bit about the healthiest way to approach braaiing, but I think it just involves a bit of common sense. But we'd love to hear from you guys. 021 430 9881. Maybe you've got some good braai.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
All right, so we are talking braais. Boo to Dr. Darren Green. Now, I'm sorry, man. I know I'm painting you with a negative brush, but we're talking about some very real, very relevant concerns about braaiing. And I want to ask now, does the white rabbit, is it white rabbit, or something, that trick when the smoke gets in your eyes, does that actually work?
You know what, that's one of the things. I go to a braai and I have to wash everything. The clothing I was wearing, my hair, everything, because of all the smoke. But how bad is the smoke for inhalation?
It's not as bad as
And
going
your
to,
eyes,
it's not as bad as going to a club.
Okay.
Boom. So yeah. So
Boom.
So braai over a club.
So tertiary smoke, obviously in terms of nicotine, for example, and the tar, leaves a residue on your curtains, on your countertops, on your couches. That can be ingested on your hands, and then when you prepare food, it's put into the food you ingested. People don't know about that, but they should. Obviously with this, as I mentioned earlier on, the carcinogenic parts of looking at the process of grilling Inhalation, smoke. Some people are really sensitive to certain types of wood. So they have allergies, their asthma is triggered, they get bronchospasm, wheezy, tight chests. And some people have obviously very sensitive nasal airways and eyes, they have tearing and so forth. But I mean, once again, it's also regarding your predisposition to it. Some people have hyperreactive airways. They're sensitive to cold air, exercise-induced asthma. They have allergies in terms of environmental factors like pollen, etc. as well. So those people are generally people that don't do very well with sitting too close to an open fire. And also people that are, in closed spaces where there's lots of dust involved and so forth as well.
But so there's no general, because a lot of this, you've been speaking about very generalized connections to cancer, but can you say that braais aren't necessarily a danger zone for an increased
100%, especially but in a ventilated area, it goes without saying. Remember, what causes cancer of the lung? Let's just put it there quickly. It's stress on the specialized cells of the respiratory system and the lung itself. Stress on those cells makes them want to change to adapt to the stress. That changing process to adapt to the stress that's placed upon them by inhaling noxious fumes over a long period of time and excessively will lead to, possibly where there's genetic involvement, certain abnormal cell types being formed, as is with all cases of cancer.
And then the body replicates
and
those
then it replicates quickly. So generally, try not to put any part of your body under excessive stress, because then it forces that change in the infrastructure of the cells.
Genetic predisposition then kicks in.
Yeah, that's where the triggers kick in.
Okay, well, we're going to have more with Dr. Darren Green. And Dr. Darren Green, when we get back, I'd love to know about smoke in the eyes and how to alleviate that. But if you've got a comment or a question, we would love to hear from you. Our lines are open. It's 021 430 9881.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
So I'm going to give Dr. Darren Green an opportunity to redeem himself here. Now, I promise you, we are not trying to shoot down the braai, okay? We are just offering a very honest and very real account of some of the health risks attached to eating too much red meat, too much fat, too much salt. Smoke gets in my eye, too much smoke. But one word that we haven't mentioned just yet is gout.
Yes.
And the relationship between alcohol, that's the natural connection I make, red meat and cholesterol. How do all of those elements tie together?
When you've had that really hot, swollen, red, painful toe once, you know what gout's about.
Yeah, and
everyone equates,
we don't mean to make light of it, because
everyone
it is
equates
really
gout
painful.
to alcohol always, and it isn't. There are other causes. It's an increased uric acid level that deposits then crystals at the level of the joint. The crystals irritate the soft tissue, the tendons, give you that red, hot, swollen inflammation,
Just
etc.
imagine what's going on. You're putting a crystallized thing in a mobile area.
And then it causes the
naturally gonna be
irritation,
pain,
when
yeah.
those crystals are deposited there. But, it's processed meat. So boerewors is actually worse for your gout than is a lean piece of fillet, for example, because it's processed meat. And that's what people need to understand. Also, you must understand the rest of your diet and your genetics. You're geared with enzymes that control the metabolism when you break down food, etc. And what happens is, in some people, they have a predisposition to high uric acid levels. And why that's important is because of the full metabolic syndrome, where you have obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease, all linked and associated. Soon you have one of those, it increases your risk almost 2 to 3-fold of developing the next one.
All of this is within the meat box, as you call it.
Yes.
The meat box.
So watch your uric acid levels. Understand that a lot of processed meats are not good for you in terms of increasing the uric acid
Is
levels.
there a connection to kidney stones and gout? Are they
Very much
one
so.
and the
So
same
you
kind
get
of thing, yeah?
stones that are called urate stones. So calcium, urate, and oxalate are the three main groups. But urate specifically is formed from people that have high uric acid levels.
Wow.
Very interesting. And I'm not sure, have you guys touched on, when you get smoke in your eyes?
Oh,
what's
yeah.
the best
No,
way
I
to
was waiting
alleviate
for you
it?
to
Move
get
away
back,
from
yeah.
the fire. But it sometimes follows you, as the guys were saying.
It's the curse. The
You
curse of fire.
you get some decent lubricant drops before your braai. Maybe use some of those. And
Goggles.
Yeah. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier on, the ventilation is quite important where you braai. So
I'm still not
braais are
convinced that the smoke doesn't naturally follow you. Maybe there's a magnetic pull. Can we bring a physicist on the show just to discuss that? So let's just put some healthy spins on here and maybe look at some healthy tips for the next time we braai, which is probably going to be next year now that we've terrified everyone.
No, man, come on.
No, I'm joking.
This weekend.
Yeah, no.
So looking at, try to balance the meat you're eating. Have obviously meat that contains less fat, because we have a cholesterol problem that's massive in South Africa. Also alcohol. We are in the top 30 countries that abuse alcohol in the world. So that's important. We associate the braai culture often with other things, like the drinking, and then we lose count of the beers and the socializing. We love the socializing aspect, which is great. But we need to just make sure that we hang around long enough to keep on socializing, which means looking at the cholesterol, the amount that you're consuming, and decreasing your risk of cancers. Have your pre-snacks a little bit healthier before braaiing. You know, look at the amount of booze you make available if you are drinking alcohol. And certainly the type of white meat, fish, chicken, without the skin, obviously. Look at seasoning that in a way. Marinating meat, by the way, reduces your chances of cancer, even if it's just 30 minutes. Marinating and using natural ingredients like red pepper, excuse me, rosemary and other types of herbs on your meat certainly also help in terms of those compounds that I mentioned that get deposited on it. So don't overcook your meat. Marinate your meat to 30 minutes before the time if you can. And then obviously, as I mentioned, the fat that drips in the fire, if that forms smoke, the compound then forms a residue on the meat. And that's the thing that we need to watch out for.
Diversify. I absolutely love that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Darren Green, for joining us this morning and telling us a little bit more when it comes to the braai culture that we love so much as South Africans. So hopefully you'll have the next braai a little bit healthier.